Okay, my name is Mike Pucciarelli, and as you may know, I love to do still life photography and other types of photography, but I really like to do still life photography. And in tonight's lecture, we're going to talk about props with the plexiglass tables. So our agenda tonight is how to use simple lighting modifiers with and without adding more strobes. And then I've illustrated on equipment, both retail and homemade. Some of the stuff you can make homemade, but some of it you should buy. And tonight I'll talk about camera settings a lot more. So we're not going to talk about Adobe Photoshop, and we're not going to talk about Adobe Camera Raw. And if you ever have any questions, you can always email me at mpucciarelliart2016@gmail.com. Feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions. So these are the still life tables. We're just going to talk about the top two, the white plexiglass table and the black plexiglass table. So these are lighting modifiers. These could also be considered props because they affect the light. And a prop in a photograph is anything that improves the light, anything that helps get your message across to the viewer. And if you want to add light in a dramatic way, you want to use anything silver, like mirrors, silver, gold cards, reflectors. And if you want to add lights in a soft way, you use white reflectors, white cards. Black cards are great for when there's too much light. I mean, when there's too much daylight or when a strobe bleeds too much light. That's why I use a black card, to take away the glare. Then there's Plexiglass Fusion scrims. I'll be talking a lot about those tonight. Those are great for softening light. Those are great for creating a background. And then gels are great props for affecting the color of the backgrounds and also the subject. And I'll be talking about those tonight too. And then there's medium-sized plexiglass sheets where you can put in front of the strobe and it'll soften the light. And then a Cinefill, which is black aluminum foil, where it's like aluminum foil, but it's only black, and it's great for creating a snoot if you're really tight with money on a budget. And there are many ways you can use Cinefill colorful gels. You could use, you could use duct tape or clothespins to attach to the strobe. Then there are blinds. Blinds are great for controlling the light, aiming the light, and this is great for natural light. Then there are spring clamps. Any size is great, where a small one could hold a gel to a strobe. And there's duct tape and clothespins. That's great for holding, the gels or the scrims to the strobe, or the plastic fusion scrim to the strobe. So the bottom are great for holding anything in place of the top, props. And a lot of this you can buy at a hardware store. Some of it you can buy at a drugstore. You can buy a lot of this at an art store. Let's see if there's any, let's see. Okay, I don't see anyone else trying to come in, that's fine. This is the white plexiglass table. And you can buy these at many websites. It doesn't have to be BH or Amazon, but these go out of stock really, really fast. And you can buy this at BH, but be aware of what you buy because the frame can be really expensive, like the Manfrotto frame. The frame here, it's not a Manfrotto frame, but it's a good frame. And I still use this plexiglass table today. And there are many ways to use a white plex table with one light, flash continuous. You can add a natural light. And of course, that angle of the camera, position of light. And we'll talk about the props, how they can be angled too. And the next set of slides, we'll talk about how to use one light, one prop, how to use props in place of another light. So that's all coming up next. This is just one light. This is great for product photography. Simple setup. You can have a white card or a silver card that bounce in light, depending on what you want to do. You can have the same over here. And you could also have a light over here or over here, and you can bounce in light with a white film card or a silver card. You could also have the light here. So it depends on what you're trying to do with the photograph you create. And there's many ways, as I said in this diagram, to create with one light. Now in food photography, where depending on, like if you do a hamburger, you have the light over here. Now if you have a plate of food, you have the camera on top of the food. But you would have the light from the side to get in shadows. So when you put in good shadows, the photograph looks really, really interesting. This is another way to use one light. It's just a big strobe, but I have a big white scrim. It's a nice white background. And this is a glass subject. And the light will bounce right through. And you probably have to power your strobe all the way down because it's very powerful. And again, you could put like a gel to make the background blue or whatever color you like. And I'll share that later. Now this is with two lights, where you can have a light here, a light here. You can also have a light at top, but you can also add a white card in place of a light to bring more detail in the shadow, or a silver card. And you may have, glares on your product. You could use like a black card to block the glare, or you could use a scrim to make it, the light smooth, and you probably have to feather the light. So I'd recommend that you start with one light like this. Instead of getting another light, you can get another light, but put like a silver card that bounces in detail in the shadow so it looks natural. Sometimes you just need another light, depending on where you want to do, where you want to put it. This is a good setup for bringing out the edges of a product. And another way to do it is have the strobes fire at each other. You probably want to have plastic fusion scrim so the glare won't be so harsh. And this is another way to use two lights, where you have a nice white background, but this is not glass. If this were the only light, this would be a nice silhouette. Now, there's ways to do a silhouette with detail where you put in silver cards to bounce in light on either angle. That's how to get another light out to bring this out better. Sometimes you just need to add another light. And the light doesn't have to be here. It could be from this corner. You could have silver cards that bounce in light. Or it could be from this corner. You could have silver cards or white cards that bounce in light. Depending on what you want to do, sometimes a silver card, it's just too harsh. And that's why, you want to use like a white card that bounces light in a soft way. This is with three lights, where we have a light coming from here at a 45-degree angle. This is your key light. And this is a light coming from underneath. And if you want to, you can move this light for reflection, or you can move it right underneath. And you can also affect the power of the light, depending on the type of shot you like. And this is the background light. And you can also have, white cards that bounce in light and silver cards. And this is how, you put the gel on the strobe. You could have multiple colors. You could have a dark color and a light color. And this is another way to use with, armature clips. But another way to use it was with this, like this, but this is facing the table where you put the gel on the soft fusion material of the strobe. You just lay it on, and you can have a dark color and a light color, or you can have this as a dark color, and the side you can have a light color. You can also do this with C clamps or spring clamps, and the same thing with here, but I like to use, clothespins. Or you could use very small spring clamps. It's another way to use, spring clamps, 3-inch ones. And this is a way to use a spring clamp to hold up a foam wall, a plexiglass sheet, or if you just need to hold something up, this is another way to do it. This is great for softening the light. Like if a strobe were here and the product were here, this is great for making the light softer. This is the scrim you put in front of a strobe. Sometimes you can use like a double scrim to get the effect that you like. This is a grid. There's several ways you can use it. You can use it like this, but if you're doing food photography, you flip it horizontal and you sprinkle light at the top at a 45-degree angle. You can also have like white cards and silver cards that bounce in light to bring in details for the shadows of the food. There are many ways to use the black plex table, whether you use flash continuous or natural light. Again, angle the camera, position the light. This setup's great for like a watch, anything flat. Now in this type of setup, I don't use any gels, but that doesn't mean you cannot. I don't. I'm sure other people have. And I'll talk about, I always use it at a 90-degree angle. Looks better to me. But in today's digital world, you can turn this into a blue background if you like. And again, you could use white cards to bounce in soft light. You can use silver reflectors for more dramatic light. And there are ways to use this table with the, a light in the back here. I'll talk about that later. I can have a light here, here. I can also have silver and white reflector cards. This is how to use it with one light. And this is perpendicular to the slant. You want to make sure that the light is aiming at the subject. And this is where you have to angle your camera so that the light is shining on the subject. Sometimes you can use 2 scrims to get the effect you like. And this is a way to use it with, at a 90-degree, where if you want to create a nice blue background, you can have the strobe, the fusion softbox. You can use like clothespins to put on the gels. And you can use many colors to get a cool effect. And there's ways you can do vignetting by lowering the light and raising the light. So position of light is very important. And you can add mirrors, but depending on what you want to do, like if this were a glass subject, light would shine right through. And I'll talk about other ways you can do lights too in the following slides. See, glass, the light is shining right through. And you look at the bottom, I want more of a vignette, so that's why I cut the light in half, so I lower the light. You also could move the light farther away. And you can angle the light up. And I'd recommend attaching a gel to the strobe with clothespins. You get a nice blue background. This is a foam board where, again, you could put a gel if you want a nice cool blue background. This is at a 90-degree angle. And I want to show off the edges. And this is only glass. And if I want to bring out the details without using the strobe in the front, you could put like a big silver card where the flash would fire, but you would sprinkle light to bring this out. It's another way to do product photography, where if you have a powerful backlight and you have a nice big silver card, you bring the detail out this. And if you want to make the lines bigger, you can move the glass to change the size of the lighting lines. This is how I'd use it with the 90-degree angle, where you attach the gel with clothespins. I never use it with the 45-degree. That doesn't mean you cannot, but it's how I do it and other people do it. And you can have like, welcome, Tony. This is being recorded, so I will post the recording. So we already started, but this is being recorded. So we're talking about props, and we're talking about gels, where this is at a 90-degree angle. You want to have like a blue background. And for a good contrast, I recommend like a dark color, a light color. There's all things you can do with gels. You don't have to use one gel. And I usually use it, like I said, at the 90-degree angle. And this is another way to use one light. I have a nice white reflector where the light will bounce right through. Then I have like white cards because I felt like the silver cards are too harsh. Suppose it was for a mug. I could have a background light. I could also have this positioned differently, like at a 90-degree angle. I could also have silver cards, but sometimes you just need to use under the light. And you could have silver or white cards to bounce in light. You could do this with continuous light, but most times I just use flash. But continuous is great when flash is not possible. This is with two lights, where this is the background light, and you can put a gel here for the background color. You can also put a gel here to change the color to blue. Or you want to put a yellow here and a blue, or a blue and a yellow. And I would have the fancy clips, or I could put like a 3-inch spring clamp to hold this. But a lot of times when I use gels with the strobes, I usually have it hanging from the softbox material with like a clothespins, like this. In this scrim, the frames come from Plaza Arts or the art store. And then the plastic fusion material, you can buy it at Amazon or BH. This is two strobes with a black foam board, where the angle of the light's probably too harsh. So you could put a scrim there, or you could move the light to the right and cut some of it out if it's too powerful. but I recommend scrims to soften the light. Want to make sure you position the watch correctly so you get the detail from this light and this light. This is another way to do, you can use this with one light too, like a big strobe. Doesn't always have to be two. You'd also use, natural light. And where if the natural light's too strong, you can work with the blinds, or you just get a black card and cut some of it out. This is like 3 strobes. We're gonna have with 2 strobes. You have a big strobe or 2 strip boxes. You can also have natural light. You can also have a strobe here. And again, you can put like gels to change the color of the backgrounds of the subject with clothespins. And these are like C or G clamps. Really called C clamps. We just hold up the scrim at a 45-degree angle. And this is to hold up the scrim at a 90-degree angle. And you can do this with like small, these are regular size C clamps. You can use big ones, but these medium size or regular size will be fine. You can buy this at any hardware store. And these are spring clamps. Some people like these alligator clamps. They're more expensive, but spring clamps will work just fine. And these are the regular 3-inch ones. And these are the 5-inch ones. And these are great. These are hard to open, but they will hold something in place. And again, you can buy this at a hardware store or online. Then we have scrim walls where when I use a strobe, they'll soften the light. You might also want to angle the light to soften it. Or if you want to use a strobe here, you just use like a white card here. Or if you want to have 2 white walls, the strobe will go here. It'll bounce in light. And then we have the silver reflectors, great for bouncing in light in a strong way. Then you have like a black card. A black card will block out harsh glares. A black card can control the light. If there's too much light from a window or when a strobe fires out too much light. You could have gold walls. You could have like maybe a silver wall and a gold wall. Gold wall. These are just silver reflectors or gold reflectors. You can buy this at an art store. Maybe I got these at BH. So I just want to give a midsection summary is that there's many props you can use that can enhance a photograph. I just recommend that you start from one light and try adding a prop before a light. Try using a silver card. Do you like what you see? Then add a white card for softer light. So I'm assuming that, does anyone have any questions? I don't see any in the chat. Now this is the Canon settings. Your screen is probably different. Someone just joined us, and I'll wait till she connects. Hi, this is being recorded, so you can listen to the recording when I post it. Thank you for joining. Now we're talking about camera settings. Where A lot of times I just use the manual with still life or the bulb mode for light painting. And I always shoot in RAW. And I always have to use AI focus. And I'm gonna have screenshots on all this, explaining this coming up. Sometimes to control the exposure, I have to cut the shutter speed in half, like 1/25th to 1/250th to get the exposure I like. This is the drive mode. A lot of times I just use a single shooting, but I've used all of them. And like the timers are great for self-portraits or still life. You have the 10 seconds, and then you have the 2 second. And outdoor, I like to use a high speed continuous. You can also use a low speed, but most of the times I just like to use the single shooting. Then there's a metering mode. I like to use the evaluated mode for good contrast. And then this is I use a lot. I also use the spot metering for portraits. When you want to shoot either manual or aperture mode, you lock the exposure. Then there's partial metering. Partial metering is great for when you have a big lighted background and a small subject. That's worth experimenting if the light is so bright out. It's good that you use partial metering. And it's great for when you have a really light background against a dark subject. But a lot of times, I just like to use evaluated mode. And I always like to use a standard picture mode. These are also fun, the top row, but I never use monochrome because if I want to do black and white, you could affect the pixels. I always like to use standard because it's the sharpest. And these last 1, 2, 3 are just custom settings that you define, but I always like to use the standard for everything. But I know other people that were successful in using like the top row, like portrait, landscape, but I always like to use standard. Now it's a focus mode. I always like to use the manual because you focus on several parts of the photograph. And that's been really effective. I like to use this more than 19 point because the 19 point, you have to keep resetting. But people have different preferences. And then there's a single point focus where you just move the point where you want to focus. And then there's a spot autofocus where if you do macro photography, you should use this. And you basically move the cursor to where you want to apply the focus. You got to look at the photograph and move the cursor. This is like a more smarter single point of focus, but it's called spot auto for macro. I like to use zone autofocus manual the best. A lot of times I like to use the daylight auto balance, which is 5200. Sometimes I like to change the temperature to 5500. Sometimes I experiment with the 700. I never use auto because it doesn't look natural. And sometimes you could use a custom white balance where you photograph a white card and you set it. But if the light changes, you got to do a new custom white balance. And that's why I just like to, I like to use either daylight or just custom, just set the Kelvin to like 550 or 600 for daylight. I like to use the features of long exposure noise reduction. With the properly exposed image, you almost don't need this, but I like to use it just in case. 1 or 2 is good. It's better than using off. 1 is automatic. But when you switch it to 2 is a little more complicated where it's good for taking out blue color cast. Modern DSLRs, today's technology, you almost don't have to use 2. You could just use 1. But if you need to take out blue color cast, you can just use 2. So it's there if you need it, but I just like to use one for automatic. Then there's high speed noise reduction, where I'd recommend 0, 1, or 2. I'd rather you use it than disable it. It won't hurt if you use it. And then with a properly exposed image, you almost don't need this, but it won't hurt if you use 0, 1, or 2. So you're going to take a photograph. Let's try to take care of the problem in the camera before Photoshop. And that's why it's better to maybe try these settings. And then if you're happy, you're happy. If you're not, then try again with another setting. This is the color space. A lot of people, they use sRGB to post on the web. And it's great for posting on the web, but make sure you don't copy a JPEG into Photoshop, because you have a color, you have like a profile problem where, because the Adobe Camera Raw default is RGB. And there's a big difference in colors where the Adobe RGB is 57 billion colors. And then when it's converted over to sRGB, and then it's down to only 16.7 million colors. Then when you convert it over to CMYK, it's only 16,000 colors. But some people, they start with Adobe RGB, and then convert it over to ProPhoto, which is 281 trillion colors, but some of the colors you won't be able to recognize by the human eye, but technology is changing that. You may see people use ProPhoto RGB because the advancements in technology, but I like to start with Adobe RGB, where, and then in Photoshop you work with it. Then when you save it as a JPEG from Photoshop, you'll make the sRGB conversion and you post it on the web. So the difference between the sRGB, the RGB, and CMYK and ProPhoto. This is exposure bracketing, where a lot of times I just use one stop under and one stop over. And I like to use one stop because if you use two stops, if it's overexposed, you have more detail in the one stop overexposed. And the files are easy to work with. It all depends how much light you have too. I like to do a lot of this outdoors. These are the strobes I use. And you can put, gels to change the colors. You have 2 strip boxes and 3 regular flash. These are a non-continuous light. This is great when you can't use flash. Like if you want to catch like a splash, like a water splash reaction, you're probably better off using a continuous light than a strobe, because you may miss the shot with the strobe. That's why we have continuous lights. And there's ways you can make it more contrasting with turning the switches on and off. These are all my stands, and these are the sandbags. I'll talk about concrete blocks later. This is one way to use concrete blocks to hold stuff. Some of the stands came with the sandbags, but then you can buy them at the other two you can buy at a hardware store. They have all types of stands: the ground stands, the big boom stands, the regular stands. And there's white reflectors and silver reflectors. They're great for adding in light. Like we said, like a white for soft light, a silver for more dramatic light. They're great props to take in place in place of a strobe, adding in light in a shadow. These are snoots. You want to make sure that you have the grid on for contrasting light. And the snoots do come with gels. You can put the gel resting on the snoot. But you can only, maybe you could use 2 gels, but I would just use 1 gel because it's a small part of the equipment, the snoot. These are great for aiming the light at a small part of the subject. And these are like these are great aluminum reflectors. This is great for when you fire light. Aluminum help fire light to make the subject look more contrasting. These are great for like portraits to bring out the face better. This is very hardcore aluminum. It's very solid, and this will last for a lifetime. You know, like I said, it's great for solid products or dramatic portraiture. And these are tables that I make. These are great still life tables. You can do a lot of light painting on this. You can use these small tables for like jewelry there. You can hang it there. And this is a rack that I made from wood where now it has many holes in because I'm holding in a lot of stuff. And I have woods facing up at the edge to hold everything in. There's many ways to use this, but now I used to put all my stands in here, but now I use it as a container to hold like a backdrop. And well, now I use it just to hold all my foam boards, many sizes. These are cubes. These are great for creating like a small plexiglass table, white or black. And they're great to hold stuff too. And these crates are great for holding things. These grates are good to hold up like a foam board. You know, sometimes store managers should throw these away. I found one on the side of the road many months ago. I decided to clean it and take it home. So these are good to have, and they can be used in many ways. And the same thing with buckets. You could rest something on, you could hold stuff with. You see in the other photograph, you could hold stuff in the block holes here, but this is also good if you want to put a foam board and it'll hold it in place. And these are stools. You can this into a miniature table. You can put this under a plexiglass table. You could put the light on. This is great to support a light underneath a white plexiglass table. This is the floor lock. This is a great to support a light underneath a white plexiglass table. You can angle the light for reflections. You can put the light underneath. I made part of this. This I got when I ordered a new dishwasher. I did not want to throw this away, so I decided to screw in a piece of wood, and it's a good addition. And these are big black hard beads. This is great to create a nice fancy background. This is also great for light painting to make the room really, really dark. And you could use it to block light from a strobe. But I like to use this. I cover up the doors and I make the room really dark to do light painting. These are expansion poles where you could hold stuff like with the C-clamps. That hold a big screen background. These are regular 1-inch poles. These are great for if you want to hold something, you can put the holes in the rack. And these poles, they screw on. This could also hold stuff up. You could use this in many ways. You could hold up a plexiglass or a scrim at a 40-degree angle, or you could put this in a rack. You could put a backdrop cloth over it. These are all my lenses. Most of the lenses are prime. I use the most, the sharpest, the cheapest, but these are great for sharp quality. But I also use 7200, 100, 400, but the technology advancing that the zooms are becoming almost as sharp as these. This is about image stabilization, which Canon calls it. Nikon calls it vibrant reduction, where if you use a tripod, you want to turn it off. But if you don't use a tripod, you want to keep it on. That's image stabilization. And then there's autofocus and manual focus, where a lot of times outdoors I like to use autofocus, but when I'm doing light painting, I do a pre-focus, and then I switch it to manual, and the focus stays the same. So the sensor doesn't have to work too hard to think. About the image stabilization, you should try to use this correctly because the image could have color shift problems. You could damage the pixels. These are camera cases. I bought these at Micro Center. These are 3 times less they cost than the other cases. They're very tough, they're very sturdy, and they don't take up a lot of space. These are tripods. I always use ISO 100, 200 with a tripod. Without, I use 400 or greater. I always like to use a cable release or remote release when doing still life or outdoor. Sometimes I just, make a firm press on a shutter with any table, not just the white Plexi table. The camera stand, this is great. It's great for holding the camera. You can put a light up here. You can attach a weight, a bag, to make it more sturdy. And I use the same ISO settings with the camera stand as the tripod. This is a wired cable release. I most of the time use a wired cable release for all my Plexi table. Sometimes I press a very firm shutter, but use what you're comfortable with. I recommend a remote release, but just be sure the directions you use the desired release. And your cell phone can be used as a release too. And this is a wireless shutter remote where this will work on any hot shoe, and it's by AAA batteries. And you just put this on the camera and you can walk 15 feet away. And this is great for light painting. This is even better than the wired remote, but I still use a wired remote too. Very good timer. As you could use it 80 meters with the remote distance. And there's 30 possible channels to work with when you use this. So this is a very good thing to use. This is a transmitter, the L Skyport transmitter. And it has 16 channels in 4 different groups. And you can use many lights with this. It only uses 2 AA batteries, and this below uses 4 AA batteries. But you want to make sure you're in manual mode because this could take the place of this. It's a good substitute if you don't have your transmitter. This works with the Elecom strobes. And this, the bottom, the 430, can work with any strobes. You just have to make sure you set it to manual. I like to use Novus to clean. A lot of times I just use Novus 1, does a good job. Maybe I could use 2 for light sketches. I rarely ever use 3. You can buy this at any auto store or any website. The bottom 2, the tweezers, they blow air. You definitely want to use this for the black Plexi table because Dust is falling when you take the photograph. It'll appear in the photograph if you don't use the dust bar. You do a lot less cloning in Photoshop when you use these. Just blow air before you take the shot. These are the mirrors. You can buy these mirrors at CVS. You can buy these clamps, armature clamps. They're great for folding. You can also buy simple, mirror plates at any hardware store. You have duct tape. This is armature wire. This is great for holding stuff. Used in the film days, but we can still use it today. These are CAG clamps. These are great for holding things. Like you saw in the other part of the presentation, I used the medium this, but you can use big ones and small ones. And these are all my spring clamps. And the many ways to use these. You see many slides with these. These are gels. This is a great prop to change the color of the background of light. These are silver cards for adding a light and gold cards for adding like yellowish tint. This is Cinefill. This is great for creating a snoot. You just attach duct tape or spring clamps, small spring clamps. This is draft fusion paper. This is great for cleaning a fusion background. And you can put gels too. You could put gels to change the color. These are all my scrims. And sometimes you could buy a big frame. You could attach the draft paper here with staples. And these are stretcher art frames with the fusion material stapled on. And these are all my plexiglass sheets where I have bigger ones on sawhorses, but these are great for creating like a miniature table. And there's ways you can use the clear where if you want to do food at a floating way, you have like a white foam board on the floor, or you can even have a strobe like firing up. So many ways to use all these. These are big white cards. Of course, you can create a white background. But you could also create a gray background depending on how you use the light. The same thing with the black cards. They're great for creating like a black background, but you can create like a brownish background depending on where you put the light. So there's many ways to use these white cards and black cards. So these are my Facebook groups. I have a still life fine art photography group. It's now called MFP, still life fine art photography group. They have an architecture, design, and cityscape group. They have a photograph display gallery. It's another fine art group. The sculpting light is good for light painting. Then you have the dramatic product photography where you can take a dramatic headshot or dramatic product. These are all my meetup clubs. These are my business links, my Facebook, my Instagram, I'm on there all the time, my Google, my LinkedIn, my Twitter. There's my fine art website, and then my portfolio. So that concludes my presentation. You can always email me at mpucciarelliart2016@gmail.com. I just want to ask if anyone has any questions. If you want to talk, just unmute. All right, so I'm going to end the presentation and I will post the recording and I'll post it on my meetups and on my websites. Thank you for listening. I also have a YouTube still life photography channel. Feel free to like and subscribe. I have many small tutorials on Photoshop and also the white plex table and the black plex table and light painting. And I also like software, like how to use Photoshop. So I have a lot of small links that can help people. Thank you for listening to this webinar. I'm going to stop the presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad you liked it.
Yeah, very helpful. Have a good rest of the evening.
You too. Thank you.